Hang on for a second here. With all the news going down and all the conversation going down, anything could break at any moment right now. Anything. But we always started out with Big Sills. You know, it's been an interesting time since Monday. Doesn't Monday seem like it was like 4 months ago now for the Eagle fans and the Eagle organization? It just seems like it's been 4 months. And there's no doubt about it that you have to think about the landscape of the NFL, the coaching searches, what's going on. I'm going to make a point to you right now about the Philadelphia Eagles and where they are when it comes to their decision, when it comes to Nick Sirianni and whether or not he's going to remain as the head football coach. I want you to put this in proper perspective here. If the Eagles didn't like the position that they were in right now, they would shut this conversation down immediately. That's an organization that likes to get in front of things. So to me, it's what the Eagles aren't saying that you need to be reading, not what they're saying. Because right now, that whole Sean Desai thing, you know, it makes more sense now. And me and Tone were talking about this a couple months ago. Remember when I said all of a sudden they're doing up-down drills? Jalen Hurts is doing fumble drills? And Tone's like, Sills, they've been doing that. Yeah, but not put out there like that on websites and Twitter pages and all. It was like they wanted to get ahead of it. Then they made the decision to demote Sean Desai. That's an organization that wants to get ahead of things. They don't like anything lingering. So that's why where they are right now, allowing the conversation, nothing's been settled on Sirianni's future as head coach of the Eagles. I don't think at all. They're taking basically a historical game plan and page out of how they dealt with Doug. They're looking for coordinators. They want to know if he's going to go along with everything that they're saying and doing right now. And if there is a speed bump somewhere in this process, that could be detrimental to the future of Nick Sirianni. I think right now, Nick Sirianni is sitting on the hottest seat of any coach in the NFL. Because nothing's been determined. If that organization, think about this, if that organization, knowing the way they operate with their PR department, wanted to shut that down, the owner and general manager would come out and say, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Nick Sirianni's our guy and always been our guy. That's not the case. It's what they're not saying. They're letting you know right now his job status is still being evaluated. And that they're going to take a week to go through this process. Even though they're looking at new coordinators, that has nothing to do with the job status of Nick Sirianni. And everyone can put a conjecture on it. Hey, it looks like he's coming back. Wouldn't the Eagles just come out and say he's coming back? Jerry Jones did that today. Mike McCarthy, or late last night. Mike McCarthy's coming back. And by the way, don't think that Mike McCarthy's probably not going to not get an extension. You know what Jerry Jones did? He went with the 36-5. He's 81 years old. He went with stability. He doesn't want chaos, rip it apart, get a new guy, start over. He doesn't want it. He thinks they're close. I don't blame him for bringing Mike McCarthy back. You're 36-15 in 3 years. You really want to blow that up? For what? To bring something else in, 81 years old, maybe take a step backwards? Very rarely do you see a new coach come in and all of a sudden he's going to take your team to a Super Bowl and actually win it. It doesn't happen like that. You got a decision to be made on Dak Prescott. Both Prescott, get this. How do you know Jerry Jones isn't doing this? Tone, I don't know if you subscribe to this. Well, you know what I'm going to do? Let's bring Mike back 1 year and Dak back 1 year. And if this thing goes to total holy hell, I'll just hire Deion Sanders and bring his kid in, Shedeur Sanders. They got 1 more year at Colorado. How do you know he doesn't do that? And hire Deion like they did DeMeco Ryans in Houston. And then you bring in Shedeur Sanders too. Lurie and Nick didn't even meet yesterday. Yeah, people got ahead of that report like they did the Jason Kelce one. Lurie would rather go yacht shopping than speak to Nick right now as reported. By the way, once again, if the Philadelphia Eagles wanted to squash that Nick wasn't the head coach, they would have already. Think about what the Cowboys are looking at. Well, we're going to run this back one more time. Both guys are coming back with 1 year left on their deals. Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy. Doesn't work out. Deion Sanders and his kid comes to Dallas. Would that be out of the realm of possibility? No. Then he could pass the team off to Steven. Jerry Jones has 2-3 years left running the Cowboys. He's not going to blow that up. He took stability. The Steelers stuck with stability. Mike Tomlin. By the way, you know what's crazy? Mike Tomlin, since he won the Super Bowl, has an under 500 record. And I think Mike Tomlin, and I think the world of Mike Tomlin. But everybody's shitting all over Bill Belichick and what he did without Brady. Well, Mike Tomlin, since he won the Super Bowl, is under 500 in the postseason. Hard to win in that league. Would you be okay with Nick, Frank, and Patina? I have coordinators. We're going to look at offensive coordinators and the top defensive coordinators for potential hires for the Eagles. Because personally, until they decide what the head you know what's crazy? It really doesn't matter who the head coach is. They're looking for coordinators right now. And quality coordinators to coordinate for the upcoming 2024 season. I keep hearing people say that Jalen Hurts is going to be part of the decision-making when it comes to who's going to be hired. I don't know if I necessarily believe that. I don't necessarily believe that. So you think that the quarterback has more say in Philadelphia than the head coach? Maybe. It could be. It could be. Carson Wentz had no say in anything, and they gave him the money first before they gave Jalen Hurts. He had no say in who his coordinators were. He had no say in the direction of the team or the personnel. Why would Wentz get it? Or why would Hurts get it? It's not something that did they ever give Donovan McNabb say in the direction of the team? I don't think so. So I don't know. I mean, has that been something in the past that they've given the quarterback at the Philadelphia Eagles any kind of autonomy or say? I don't think so. T. Owen imploded on himself. I don't think Owens had anything, and McNabb had anything to do with that. That was something the front office did. Okay? He's 100% going to be a part of it. Why would he be a part of it? So let me ask you this. If he's going to be a part of it, why wouldn't he defend Brian Johnson? That's his boy. Is he coming back? Maybe that's when we'll know. If Brian Johnson comes back, Jalen Hurts probably had something to do with that. Then we'll know he had something to do with the guy coming back. But if he doesn't come back, Jalen fired his friend? Doesn't support his head coach? Or his decisions being made? Again, it's great to say that. But that's just something that's been a precedent in Philadelphia. Will they change? Why would Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman change a precedent when they don't believe they've done anything wrong yet? Remember something, that tandem in the last 2 years has won 25 games in an NFC championship. And for all intent and purposes, they had a shitty year and they won 11 games. That's something to hang your hat on. You got to look at this at both sides, not just from one angle here. By the way, Do I want the guy fired? Yes. Do I think there's shitty coordinators in the room? Yes. But that's not how they operate. You can't think like you think. If that makes sense. You can't sit here and go like this. Well, this is what I would do. Well, that's not how they operate. There's a power structure in place for a reason there. The owner is involved in the decision-making of the coordinators. Why? What would Jeffrey Lurie, sitting on a yacht, need to be informed on who his coordinators are? What is that? It's buffoonery. A guy sitting in the Caribbean wants to be informed who the coordinators are going to be in the job search and in the interviews. For what reason? I mean, what do you think? You're Ozzie Newsome? Hurts is Lurie's golden child. He never had. You got it wrong, man. These owners don't give a shit about people like that. These guys are widgets. You are under the impression that these owners love their players. That ain't the case. I'll fire these guys in 10 seconds. You gave Carson Wentz $38 million and one of the top contracts in the NFL at one time. Was he his golden boy too? Had to have been. You don't give a guy that kind of money and not think that that's his boy. You don't pay shitty people that kind of money. They picked wrong. Okay. Okay. Hey, name me one quarterback that had say in anything in this Eagle organization under Jeffrey Lurie. But you think Jalen Hurts is going to have a say? He may. That'll be a course change. Be a course change. We need football guys. Well, you don't have football guys making football decisions. Look at your draft. Where in the building do you have football people making football decisions? Let me think. Stoutland? Who else? Here's the people making your football decisions. Two bookworms, the owner and the GM, and a yes man. Those are your three people making football decisions. Okay? Going to have to die on the vine with that. Again, I don't think anything is solidified that he's back yet. No way. I think if there's a trip or a skip over the speed bump, I think Sirianni's gone. But I think Nick's smart. He's going to maneuver through it because he doesn't have the equity that Doug had with the Super Bowl. By the way, you really going to let Nick Sirianni go into this upcoming season a lame duck coach? Is that how you're going to do it? Think about that. Why don't you resolve this quickly? Either he is or he isn't. Give the guy an extension. Maybe not give him an, I don't know. Are you really going to let him walk? If Nick Sirianni is brought back, he will be already the number one head coach on the hot seat going into 24. Before the season even starts, if you bring him back. Think about that. He'll be set up for disaster if you don't win right away. There won't be a coach in the NFL that'll have a hotter seat than Sirianni if you bring him back and you don't do something with quality assistant coaches around him. Listen, man, I'll tell you this. The problem that you have here is Roseman. He's the problem. He's got too much power in the building. He has too much power over football operations. I mean, this guy is a capologist, plain and simple. That's it. Do I think he's a good organizer? I kind of do. I think there's a lot of quality to what this guy does, and there's some good assets that he brings to the organization. Would I give him a contract extension because of the way that he negotiated Hurts' contract? I've said it before, I would. He's brilliant. When it comes to drafting, he needs to take a seat. How short a leash do you think he'll be on next year? I told you already. I think Howie Roseman and everybody are looking at this thing, and I would say this to you. I would say that, without a doubt, Nick Sirianni has 8 games next year. He has 8 games. 8 games. Now, let me ask you something before we move on to the topics here. Because you guys have pulled the Doug Peterson playbook right out here for Nick. Does he deserve to fix this? Eagles front office seems as bad as Jerry World. Carmina, yeah. Ask yourself this, and I think this is a fair question. Do you think Nick Sirianni, with the success that he has had, deserves the chance to turn this around? Yes or no? 3 straight playoffs, best winning percentage in the history of the Eagle organization as a head coach. Jalen Hurts was a runner-up MVP in his time. He's had 2 coordinators hired as head football coaches. He's had the number 2 defense in the NFL. And he's had the number, 9 passing game. Look at Maurice. Yeah, I get. Doesn't he have the chance to turn this? You wouldn't give him a chance to turn this around. I'm debating on this. Nick will be Brandon Staley. I see that. Peter, I don't know what's wrong or right here with this question. And I hate this question because I don't have conviction, and I don't like that. Don't you think he has the right to turn this thing around? So he takes you to a Super Bowl. You lose by 3 points. It's one of the worst endings in the history of the Eagle franchise and organization in history. And he doesn't have the chance to turn it around. You don't want him to. I'm with you. I don't know that answer yet either. Because, again, at the end of the day, is he taking marching orders? If Nick Sirianni took that job with the premise of following marching orders instead of being a coach, that's the dynamic of the head coaching position of the Eagles. I think it's best not to pay the quarterback big money, and in this league, put a ton of talent around him. You know, the key is guys on rookie contracts and quarterbacks on rookie contracts coming into the league. Like, look at what CJ here. The Texans are going to be a superstar organization if they can keep Nick Caserio in the building. They're going to be a superstar franchise. Why do you think the Texans are going to be one of the best teams in the league in the next 3 years? Do you guys, surely you understand this. They just edited Kelsey and Fletcher's endorsing Nick on X. They had a chance to post what they were saying about it. You're right, Sills. Joseph, the Eagles are not going to endorse Nick Sirianni. Think about that. So they edited the endorsement of Nick out. We need to keep Nick, get great OC in DC, and things will turn around. Maybe, because it did a year ago, right? You have precedent on that. Think about what the Philadelphia Eagle PR department just did to you guys. If that's the case, they edited, and I'm taking your word on it, and they edited it and posted it on their social media pages. That's all you need to know. There's no endorsement for Nick Sirianni yet by the Eagles. They are not publicly endorsing him. Think about that. Kind of goes along with the quarterback. Is the quarterback following marching orders too? Has Jeffrey Lurie told him and Howie told him, don't endorse Nick yet? Is Jalen part of it? Because maybe you guys are right. Jalen is part of the decision-making process. The only person that's not, as a player, endorsing Nick that needs to is Jalen. And the only people in management that haven't endorsed Nick is the owner and GM. Kind of goes hand in hand, don't you think? Think about that. Think about that. Does he get the chance to turn this around? Let me ask you something. As close as you were to the Super Bowl in 22, and as far as you were away at the end of the season in 23, does it really make sense to bring in a brand new head football coach at this time right now? Do you think the ship can be righted? Because I'm going to make a point to you here. If the ship can't be righted, Jalen Hurts can't be righted. Jalen Hurts is not going to be a better quarterback with a better head coach when the job description has nothing to do with the development of the player. We all know now Shane Steichen was the guy who was developing him. Nick Sirianni has nothing to do with the development of Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. The head coach won't matter. That's why, get this, the number one priority in Philadelphia right now, it's not whether Nick's the head coach. It's who's going to be around Jalen. He gets one season to turn this around, but that's it. Dirty D, I don't know if that's the right call. Jalen's not that good. We were saying the same shit about Lamar Jackson last year. I'd be careful with that. I think in the NFL, coaching matters. That's Josh Allen. I was listening to Tone and Rob talking about, would you take Jalen Hurts over this quarterback, over that quarterback, over this quarterback? I would take pretty much any quarterback right now over Jalen Hurts until they figure out if they're going to get quality people in here around him. I don't think Jalen Hurts, right now, Jalen Hurts' chances of becoming a star quarterback again in this league are slim. And here's why. Who are you putting around him? Who are you helping him with? Get this. It doesn't matter if you have A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith or 2,000-yard receivers or whether or not you have the best O-line. You look like shit at the end of the year. You had the same personnel. This isn't a talent issue on offense. This is a directional issue. This is a developmental issue. Do you understand something here? The difference between people, it's funny when you listen to people talking about the Eagles. There's two sides of the ball. One's been neglected. The other side of the ball has been neglected, but in a different manner. The defensive side is a personnel it's a personnel issue. Schematics. But get this. Last year, the scheme wasn't the issue. The scheme wasn't the issue last year, was it? 70 sacks, you got home, ton of pressure, volume of pressure was up. You had Rena linebackers like you did a year ago. You had mercenary corners. What's different? The players. That's a talent. On that side of the ball, that's a talent neglect. What's the excuse on offense? You don't have an excuse. It's a developmental issue. You have 2,000-yard receivers. Get this. Every single person on the Philadelphia Eagle offense had a career year offensively as a skilled guy. Who's the best OC Eagles? I have the list of this. What's your excuse? Every guy had a career year. What's your excuse for losing 6 or 7 on the offensive side? What's your excuse? Every guy had a career year. Threw for more yards, more receiving yards. Running back had a career year. Gave you 1,500 yards or 1,400 yards of total offense. What's your excuse? Well, hold on. Kaboom brings a great point up. Dan, take a stand. I told you I want him out. I'm telling you, once again, Kaboom doesn't hear what I said. So let me reiterate it. I know what I would do. You got to think like they're going to do. What do you mean? What haven't you heard me say when I said fire that clown? What haven't you heard? I asked you the question because that's what they're asking themselves. Dude, you can't think like a normal human being would think whether or not this guy is a football coach or not, because he's not. But that's not the job description. You're not a football coach in Philadelphia. You're a manager. You're like a department head. You're not a football coach. You don't develop. He had nothing to do with the development of Jalen Hurts. The assistant coaches did. Nothing. Shane Steichen proved it to you. What are you talking about, Stand? I'm not kissing anybody. My God almighty, once again. Dude, you're not thinking like they are. You're not thinking like they are. And this is your problem. And this is why you think everything is going to be normal and they're going to come up with Bill Belichick or some other big. That's not what they do. Holy shit, the people that have fed you bullshit for all these years and covering that team have fed you nothing but nonsense. That's not how that organization rolls and how they move. It starts with number one thing, control. If you start with control, and you know what the second most important thing is? What do you think the second most important thing is in that building? What do you think in the Philadelphia Eagle management? What do you think is the second most important thing? One is control. What's the second thing? It's money and how it's dispersed. Then it's talent. Then it's the pawn coaches. Dude, control and money. That's what wrecked your season. Well, the bad coach. Okay. Control and money is what ruined your season. Lack of money on defense, the lack of control on offense. You couldn't control the fact that you hired a bad coordinator for Jalen. It went downhill the whole way. And you know what Brian Johnson is? He's a guy that puts up good numbers, a score, but really doesn't win games. He's one of those coordinators. Numbers? Because people go, the numbers look, yeah. Well, then how'd you lose 6 or 7? In critical ball games. Do you know how many chances how many mulligans did the Eagles get last year to win the East? 3? The Cowboys gave you 3 mulligans. 3 mulligans. And you still put them in a hook, and you still hooked it into the trees. 3 mulligans. The defense, hey, you have 2 separate football teams in one group. The defensive side of the ball was so neglected with a coordinator, with players, with money, with direction. I'm stunned how that thing fell on its face. And get this, the inconsistency in the offense, it exasperated the defense's doom. That looked like Chip Kelly teams. I'm going to look at these coordinators here, and I'll tell you where you're going to pick them from. Now, I'm also going to say this. James, this is true. Frank Reich has been contacted by the Philadelphia Eagles, not only as a potential offensive coordinator, but he's working also with helping Nick and the front office go through some of these coordinators. He is involved. And to what extent will his job be moving forward? That I don't know. But he is consulting Nick Sirianni in the search for coordinators. Just so you know. Will he take the OC job? I can't answer that because I don't know really. Frank won't answer that. Frank is giving the owner, the general manager, and Sirianni input on coordinators around the NFL. And I've got a list of those names on both sides of the football. These are the names that I got from people close to the situation. Can I tell you how I know this? After I text Frank during the show, I text him back and he goes, "I think my silence tells you all you need to know." My question was, are you involved in the process? And have they reached out to you? My silence is all you need to know. I've known the man for 45 years. Sirianni's to Jalen is what Urban Meyer was to Lawrence. That's not true. They went to a Super Bowl together last year. That's extreme stuff, Dirty D. They were in a Super Bowl last year. Urban Meyer, the only way he's getting to a Super Bowl is if he buys a ticket. Mask goes that Frank got fired and he's used goods. Nobody's asking him to be the head coach, Mask. Once again, we're defining roles here. And for the record, Mask, he recommended Shane Steichen as the offensive coordinator for Nick Sirianni. He also was the guy that recommended Jonathan Gannon. And both those guys are head football coaches now. And both those coordinators got you to a Super Bowl. So whatever you want to say about Gannon and Steichen, those are recommendations by Frank to Nick. I think they keep cheerleader Nick Pinocchio and hire quality people around Jalen. Okay? That's right, LJ. That's a great point on what LJ, that's the best point LJ's made in quite some time there. Frank brought the best out of Wentz in Philly and in Indy, and he would do the same with Hurts. I believe that. I believe that. Because Frank works from limitations. Okay? Frank works from limitations. So, I got to keep an eye on my phone here because you could get a conversation. I don't know if Frank's going to take that job. I don't know if he wants that commitment. I'm talking OC. But I've got names, and I'm going to give them to you here in a minute. So they're using Frank's league relationships to keep Sirianni his job? No. Remember, Sirianni is in a process right now. It's called the Doug Peterson process. If they're comfortable with the hirings and they're comfortable with the suggestions and they're comfortable with the people, and by the way, I think it's a stroke of genius by Sirianni reaching out to Frank because Frank is revered in the front office. That's going to keep his job because he's reaching out to people they trust. Don't you get this? This is a game. This is a game. You're going to reach out to Frank. You're going to get Doug Peterson's input. You're going to get Mike McCoy's input. You're going to ask those guys for their input because why? The owner of the Eagles and the GM, they respect those guys' opinions. That's how you keep your job and take away some of those speed bumps in this Doug Peterson process. You know, what got Doug Peterson fired was the process. They gave him 8 days to hang himself, and he did. Doug probably had a different opinion on what he wanted on coordinators and assistant coaches, and that was against the grain of what they wanted, and that's what got him fired. If Frank takes OC job, does Carolina still pay? That I don't. I think they here, and I'm just going to use a number of 10 million. If they owe him 10 million a year for the next 3 years, say, and the Eagles hire him for 4 million, 3 million, okay, I think Carolina's off the hook for 3, and they only have to pay him 7. I think that's how that works. Or that 3 goes to Carolina. Something like, I think they're built into the contracts like that now. It's a good question. I don't know. I'll do some research on that. Okay? The best quarterbacks have a great offensive mind. That's correct. Okay? Coaching them for extended periods of time. Last time we had consistency was Reed and McNabb. It's a great call. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Every single one of these guys, and you can even go in NFL history. Joe Montana, Bill Walsh. Okay? Look, go through the history of the greatest, North Turner and Aikman. Not that Turner was a great head coach. He was a great OC. Worked from the Zampese line. Absolutely. All the great guys who won multiple Super Bowls. Mike Shanahan. John Elway. All these guys had people in the building that knew how to move the chains, develop quarterbacks, and develop schemes. Jalen had it. Jalen probably, I would make this point to you. Jalen Hurts was probably coached to the best of his ability last year because he had the best offensive coach he's ever had around him. And that's the kind of thing you need for Hurts, is to get that dynamic. Because you know why? If you don't have that dynamic, you'll never know if Hurts was ever going to live up to what they thought and paid him for. You know, Tone brings it up all the time. They're paying him for what they see his growth spurt was and what potentially could be. Theoretically, Jalen Hurts was paid on potential. He'll never reach that potential unless you get him the best coaches possible around him just to see if he can. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. And if he does, you got what you got a year ago. But why would you fall short of that? By hiring something less than that. That does not make sense. It never did from day one. When I told you, and we were talking in the offseason, you don't think these 2 new coordinators are going to have an impact on this team this year? No, don't worry about it. Everything will be great. Everybody's that did it. And I'm like, I don't know. Plus the turnover you had. They got out to a great start, and it kind of was like, damn. And get this, everybody, including my network and everyone, how are you killing a team that's 8-0? It just doesn't look right. You know, it never looked right from day one to me. Even in the New England game. When I first noticed this, damn, Hurts is sliding before contact. Hadn't seen that before. Is that just me? That probably still is just, something to keep an eye on. Yeah, I think it's something to keep an eye on. Well, it played itself out all year, business decisions. That was just a microcosm of what was to play out. And we saw it play out completely in the Tampa game. Okay? You see, what we did was we put too much faith in how we retooling the team. I did too. We put too much faith in, you know what we did? We overrated Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman, we overrated him. The media did. I did. We overrated him for the job he did last year. Think about this, for instance. I've said this to you. You're never, ever as great as the season you ever had, and you're never as bad as the season you've had in your career. You're somewhere in the middle. Boy, these last 2 years can't be any more of a statement for Howie Roseman than that. He ain't as good as he was last year, and he ain't as bad as he is this year. He's somewhere in the middle. I think that's a fair comment and commentary on Roseman. There's things he does well. There's things he does horribly. You know what I think his biggest problem is? He gets in his own way. He gets in his own way. And that becomes a problem. All right. These are the names I got. You guys want to go offensive coordinator, or do you want to go defensive coordinator first? Dan, would Frank teach Nick to be a better offensive play caller? That's not what the head coach's job is in Philly. The head coach's job in Philly is to kind of be a department head. Honest to God, he's not a coach. He doesn't develop. He doesn't do anything when it comes to making you better. Case in point, case studies Hurts. Did he do anything this year to develop Jalen Hurts into being a better player? Absolutely nothing. Did Jalen Hurts do one thing better this year than he did a year ago? No. Nothing. He did nothing better. There was nothing I saw Jalen Hurts do this year. Okay? Hey, the Buffalo game, the fifth quarter, I loved it. And that's my hope, is the fifth quarter. But I see the fifth quarter against Buffalo, and I saw the 4 quarters against Tampa in the playoff game. Whew, man, you can't be that different of a dude. You got to be, you know what I mean? Last impressions suck, kid. And that Tampa, whatever behavior and bedside manner you had was brutal. Now, by the way, too, Jalen not defending Nick. I'll say this to you. I don't think that's his nature. I just don't. You would hope that your highest paid player is your leader of your team. That doesn't always necessarily pan out like that. Jalen Hurts, for all the things that he says or doesn't say, one of the things, too, also, I think he struggles at 2 things: talking about himself and endorsing other people and throwing praise. I do. I don't really think he's still learning to be in front of the mic, too. He's a young kid. I think you got to give him time there. Okay? Before I move on, so Darius Slay comes out. What was the quote? Eagles defensive coordinator change was like being in 2 marriages. That's chaos. Lack of communication, lack of focus, lack of direction, lack of understanding, lack of passion, everything. You know what he's saying to you here? You're a master to 2 servants. You're like a peasant to 2 servants. One's telling you one thing, the other's telling you another thing. One person's telling you this scheme, one person's telling you that scheme. And it so looked like that. Hey, don't hate on Slade for pointing something out that was obvious and true. Slade's not wrong here. It's when you watch people running into people and not knowing proper technique and can't communicate with one another, that's exactly what he's talking about. Guys running into one another. I mean, you're basically, like I said, one person's telling you this, one person's telling you that. One person's saying this, one person's saying that. This is all in a game plan week. It's confusing and aggravating and frustrating. He's saying he's got 2 headaches. Sure, it is a headache. What's the most important thing that you can have also as a coach? Clarity. There was no clarity in the building. You have no clarity in the building at all. One voice. Well, your head coach doesn't have a voice. Who said Nick Sirianni had a voice ever? Oh, some of you thought he did. Must be very disappointing for some of you to find out that Nick wasn't really who you thought he was. Why would any good or experienced coordinator want to work in that structure? Unless it's friendship with head coach or excitement to be a first coordinator like we've been dealing with. You guys are missing pro football, Big Marshall. I'll say it again to you. $5 million will do it. Opportunity to be elevated from being a passing coordinator to a coordinator. You know, let's not get it twisted here. Last year, you had 2 guys who went on to become a head football coach in the league. This year, you had 2 guys struggle. Okay. So you're batting 500? If I'm a guy and I'm a position coach and I get the call to be a coordinator, you're damn right I'm taking that job. Wait a minute. To be the defense or offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, you're telling me I wouldn't want to have that job? Well, what are the parameters? Well, we'll work through it. I'm not turning that job down. I'm not turning that job down. Dude, you're in the league as a coach to elevate also. Well, no, I won't take that job. And by the way, that starts getting around that you won't take jobs because of whatever. You know what that does? Those 3,200 guys start teaming up going, that guy's an asshole. Why don't you ask Brian Flores about that? You know, Brian Flores has no job interviews. He has no job interviews. And he set that thing up down in Miami for the current head coach. He has no job interviews. Be careful when you start passing jobs up. Got to know how the league works, friends. What do you guys want first? The offense? I got this list. And I've got these names that the Eagles are looking at. What side of the ball do you want to hear first? They're in the process of trying to get interviews with all these guys. One of them, I'm not so sure. Let's do defense. Here are the 6 names that are being considered for defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles or trying to get interviews for them to be coordinators in Philly for 2024. Leslie Frazier, ex-Bills defensive coordinator, last 3 seasons, him being the coordinator up in Buffalo. They had a top 5 unit. They were one of the better units in the National Football League. Leslie's one of the great, brilliant minds. He's off the Tony Dungy tree. He's off the Mike Tomlin tree as well. They all work together in Tampa. And they understand cover 2. They understand schemes. They go 34-43. They're very good at it. Leslie Frazier took some personal time off for family. And I think he is one of the great minds that's in the National Football League. And to me, it would be an absolute upgrade getting somebody like Leslie Frazier in your building as your defensive coordinator. Number 2, Jesse Minter, Michigan defensive coordinator. Worked in Baltimore with John Harbaugh and obviously worked with Jim Harbaugh this past season, won a national championship. Heck of a recruiter. The one advantage that you have over the other current coaches that are in the NFL is what? recruiting, which means you know a lot of the kids that are coming out into the draft, which means it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a first-round pick. Jesse's going to understand, by the way, and he's 40 years old, kind of fits the profile. Jesse Minter is somebody that the Eagles really respect, really like. And here's a guy here that's going to be coveted by a lot of NFL teams, not just wherever Jim Harbaugh goes, because, again, that's probably you're looking at a guy who would potentially become the next head football coach in Michigan if Jim takes that job in Los Angeles with the Chargers. So you're going to have to kind of wait there a little bit on that. And Jesse Minter, a 40-year-old kid, worked both with the Harbaughs and has been recruiting and knows a lot of the college personnel coming into the draft. It would know that for the next 3 years. So he'll be able to look at players and help the personnel department. And it's always great to get somebody like that that understands the personnel that's coming out of college right now, because you can find guys. That was one of the things that helped Pete Carroll and Jimmy Johnson. What was it? Well, those two guys were recruiting national championship powerhouse teams. And that's why they were able to get guys in the second and third and fourth and fifth rounds. And they were able to talent evaluate. That entire Legion of Boom was not really built with first rounders. It was built with later round guys. That's because Carroll knew where the talent was hidden. Can you imagine having Leslie Frazier and Frank Reich as your coordinators? Change your whole world. And I like Jesse Minter. Glenn Schumann, Georgia, defensive coordinator, two-time national champion, heck of a recruiter, has been coveted by a lot of NFL teams over the last 3 years to become a DC. He's currently making about $3.5 million as a coordinator down there. He was almost a coordinator in Philadelphia last year. They interviewed him, by the way, a year ago, and he is highly respected in that building in Philadelphia. I think they offered it to him, and he turned it down because he wanted to stay at Georgia, try to win that third straight national title. I don't know where his head would be right now. Georgia's probably got the best recruiting class in the country. He had a lot to do with that. He's a heck of a recruiter. He's got a great scheme. They do some really great things. Obviously, the Eagles have a high regard for the Georgia Bulldog player. He turned it down a year ago. Now, again, knock on the door again, see what happens here. This is somebody that they're hoping to get another interview with so that they can get him into the building, potentially become a coordinator in Philly. Don Martindale, Wink Martindale, ex-Giant defensive coordinator. My only problem with him is he loves the 34. And that's something that I don't think is conducive when you have people like Jalen Carter. I mean, the 34 is, to me, it's outdated a little bit. But what Wink does is he's really great at disguising when it comes to blitzes. But here's the problem you have with Wink. Wink's going to want to bring his own people in. Would the Eagles be open to that? Having him bring in his own linebacker coach, his own corner coach, his own this and that. I just don't know if the Eagles, again, a conversation with him. Remember something, too, when you get a conversation with Martindale, when you're talking to a guy like that, I think he's 60. When you're talking to a guy like that, you can also ask him his opinion on other people that are out there. So you're kind of interviewing him for other kind of candidates as well. So he'd be an asset here also. Do I think he's a probability? I think you interview him because he's like a Fangio. You're looking for experience right now. You're looking for people to mend the fences on that defensive side of the ball. Eric Washington, Bills assistant coach, D-line coach. He's the assistant head football coach because last year, obviously, the head coach took over duties as the play calling defensive coordinator in Buffalo last year because Leslie Frazier resigned for personal reasons. You know, that's the only reason that the head coach in Buffalo took over was because Leslie resigned. And so he took over, and Eric has been a really good – they've done a nice job. They've had a lot of injuries on that football team, and Eric Washington's a very hot name. A lot of people want to see him as a potential candidate to be interviewed by the Philadelphia Eagles, and he's going to get a lot of run. You know, this is going to be interesting here. And I had a conversation with Frank on this. Would the Eagles ever do this? And he said, the Eagles are doing this. Denard Wilson, Baltimore Ravens, knows the culture, knows the building. I don't think it's beneath the Eagles to go like this. Okay. Look at what you did with Hamilton and the developing of the safety position. Look at what you did with the secondary in Baltimore. Okay. You proved your point. You're the new D coordinator of the Eagles. You know the culture, you know the building, you know the power structure, you know everything. You were right. Would they do that? They may. They like him. He was right. He proved the Eagles wrong. I would not look at that as a negative. If I'm Philly, I look at that as a positive. I would go, you're wrong. You're right. I was wrong. Here's the coordinating job. And that's the question. Would he come back? Why wouldn't he? Dude, don't get butthurt over things. It's how you get elevated. It's how you get elevated. Okay? People make bad decisions. You can't die on the vine like that. You got to do what's in the best interest of your career and what's in the best interest of where you want to get to. Leslie Frazier, Jesse Minter, DC, Michigan Wolverines. Glenn Schumann, Georgia, DC. Wink Martindale, ex-Giant, DC. Eric Washington, Bills assistant coach, D-line coach, was really the pseudo coordinator in Buffalo this year. And Denard Wilson, secondary coach, Ravens. Those are your 6 guys. Now, here are the offensive guys. You got to remember something here. This is about developing your quarterback and helping him get to where he was a year ago. You stunted his growth. I blame the organization for that. I don't blame Sirianni. Because you blame Sirianni this year, do you give him kudos for last year? Or was he just following orders again? Pay Denard Wilson whatever he wants. Get him in the building now. I think he makes the most sense of anybody. Because he knows them. He knows, and by the way, when he knows the personnel. Plus, there's going to be a revamping on that side of the ball on personnel. Plus, maybe some of the suggestions that he had a year ago. The Eagles have to look at Denard Wilson's interview now in a different light. When he was interviewing for that job in the offseason, they have to look at that differently. Have to look at that. They have to look at it. He was right. He was right about the secondary. He was right about the corners. You know what's crazy? This is just a high. You know what? This is just a guess. I wonder if he suggested that you need Gardner Johnson back and not Bradbury. And that's what got him out of the building. Or he didn't want one of them corners back, but he wanted Gardner Johnson. And that's what got him out of the building. Because something went sideways in the interview. I think it had to do with personnel. Because he was good in the scheme. Had a great secondary last year. It's not personal. It's just business. Absolutely the correct thing. NFL, man, don't take anything personal. Don't take anything personal. Don't burn bridges. Do not burn bridges. Here are the offensive coordinators for the Eagles. Obviously, Frank Reich, two-time head coach, Eagle offensive coordinator that won the Super Bowl. As I said, I'm partial to this one here. I got you, Dirty D. See it? He is a boutique guy. If I'm not mistaken, I think Frank's had 14 different position jobs, worked his way up the chain, worked for two of the worst owners on the planet, and Tepper and Irsay. He's got a great demeanor. He knows the organization. He's got a ton of connect. By the way, if you hire Frank Reich, you know the assistant coaches you bring in because of the connections that he has with people all throughout the league. You got to remember something about assistant coaches. They're gypsies. You live a gypsy life when you're an assistant in the NFL. You're going from job to job, city to city. Frank must, if you know, I don't know, somebody could do it for me. Look on Wikipedia and count how many assistant jobs in the NFL Frank's had. I think it's something like between 12 and 14 that he's had. I'm talking about assistants. I'm not even talking about a head coaching job. All the numerous assistant jobs that he's had, he's worked his way up. And you know what that means? That means you got connections into assistant coaches. And so you understand that you can make a call to a guy and go, hey, you want to come up here? You know, he can also raid guys like Doug Peterson's staff because guys on that Doug Peterson staff are also loyal to Frank. Is it 14? Eight different assistant roles for Reich. Think about that. 8 different assistant jobs that he's had, not counting head coaching gigs. Look at the people he knows. Why wouldn't you, if you're the Eagles, contact Frank Reich and go, Frank, we're looking for assistants? Gotcha. And here we go. Now, again, these are not head coaching jobs. Cliff Kingsbury, USC quarterback coach. Head coach at Arizona, 19 to 22. Texas Tech, 2013 to 18. Developed and coached and recruited Patrick Mahomes and had Kyler Murray with him. And those guys won some ball games. I think the 1 year he was healthy, they won 11 ball games. So Cliff Kingsbury, by the way, he's making a ton of money with the Arizona Cardinals. A ton of money. But he still shows you he wants to coach. Do I think he's a really good offensive-minded guy? I do. As a head coach, I don't know. Okay? I don't know. As a head coach, but as an offensive-minded guy, I think he's really talented. Okay? Number 3, Zach Robinson, Rams passing game coordinator, quarterback coach. And obviously, this is something right here. And I would make a comparison, and you guys are probably going to die when I make this comparison. Zach Robinson's got a lot of characteristics of Andy Reid. Okay? And he is highly thought of around the NFL as an up-and-coming coordinator for a guy that can really move the sticks. He's a guy that's working with Sean McVay. Sean McVay, next to Andy Reid, could arguably be considered one of the greatest play-calling head coaches in the NFL. Look at his resume. As much as everyone loves Matt LaFleur and all those guys, they were in Washington with Jay Gruden. They worked together. Sean McVay, too. They were all on that coaching staff in Washington. They know one another. All of them. Kyle, Matt, Sean, all in Washington. I mean, you're around a guy like McVay. You know what that's like? Andy Reid being around Mike Holmgren. Okay? I don't have a problem with a guy 37 years old. Why in the world would you have a problem with age? I want quality. That's like saying I'd have a problem with a 60-year-old coordinator. Dude, I don't give a shit about what your age is. I care if you're good. Are you a good DC or are you a good OC? What the hell does age have to do with anything? So you're telling me you wouldn't hire Sean McVay because he's 38 years old? Well, now I would, Sills. Oh, I knew he was a great hire. John Gruden recommended him. By the way, not for anything, that Carmichael guy being fired in New Orleans, John Gruden's going to become the offensive coordinator in New Orleans. And you want to hear something? John Gruden may become the head football coach in New Orleans next year. Gruden's going to be the OC of that team. That's almost a certainty that he's joining that coaching staff. They're working through some shit because of the lawsuit. There's a lot of things going on, and John wants to coach again. John Gruden's going to be the offensive coordinator in New Orleans with Derek Carr. That's happening. Okay? That's happening. That guy is still being paid a ton of money by the Raiders. And trust me when I tell you, John Gruden's situation is the only thing stopping him from people not making him one of the big candidates to be a head football coach in the league. Because if he didn't have all that shit with the email, he'd be a number 3 candidate to be a head coach in the league. And the Saints are looking at it like that. Okay, I know there's a lot of bullshit and baggage here, but he is some coach. And that's how the NFL looks at people. Deshaun Watson, all those rape cases, you know what? He's a hell of a player. That's how the league looks at people. Kind of shitty, isn't it? Sorry to have to pull the onion back on you. Man, there's a lot of rape cases and sexual accusations against 27 of them against Watson. They gave him a raise. They guaranteed his contract. He's the face of the Cleveland Browns. That didn't seem to stop him. You think that those stupid-ass racist emails are going to stop the Saints from hiring him? No. Yeah, but still, that's not right. Who says being right has anything to do with anything the league does? Tired of hiring guys that's around the main guy that's a revolving door. Zach Robinson is one of the hottest names out there. Watson is not a good face for anyone. Well, that's an opinion. Facts are Cleveland made him a face of their franchise. That's great, Greasy. That's an opinion, right? Because the facts are he's got over $250 million in his pocket, all guaranteed, as the face of the Browns and one of the faces of the NFL when it comes to the 32 quarterbacks in the league. Is that not the facts? Your comment's an opinion. Mine is a fact. He's one of the 32 men on the planet with $230 million in guaranteed money in his wallet. He's one of the faces of the NFL, the biggest television property of any television network. He's one of the biggest stars in the world. Well, he's not really a good face of anything. Well, the league didn't look at it that way because they gave him a raise and they guaranteed his money. Again, I know you guys don't want to hear this stuff. Again, that's not hot take shit. That's fact. I mean, you say whatever you want. Hey, John Gruden had racist emails. So what? League don't look at it. Hey, you and me think that's shitty. Absolutely. But at the end of the day, the league don't look at it that way. Saints are going to hire him as OC. And they're going to elevate him once Dennis Allen gets fired. And they're going to make him interim head coach. Then he's going to become the head coach. And John Gruden is going to be back coaching in the NFL again. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to get him at $5 million or $6 million instead of having to pay him $20 million. And that's how the Benson family is going to look at it. They got a deal for a guy who had some racist emails, who's a great coach. I got a bargain deal for a great coach. John Gruden's a better coach than Mike Vrabel. But Mike Vrabel's going to make $15 million. You don't have to pay John Gruden $15. Don't you get it? Or do I really have to paint this out to you like that? I think you know it. You just don't want to admit it. You think the Eagles can get... I like that kid, Leonard. DC from Wisconsin. I like him. Okay, I do. I like him. Okay. Steve goes, Gruden's a douche. Really? Congratulations for being what? Right? Since when does being a douche have anything to do with being hired in the NFL? That's right. Mickey Loomis loves John Gruden. Correct. That's why he had him in as a consultant. And some of you are going to go like this. Yeah, what about the racist emails? Irrelevant. Since when do they give a shit about the players and what they think? You guys think this is some sort of like democracy? You think an NFL front office and locker room is a democracy? Like the world you live in, right and wrong? What world do you live in? Oh, that's right. The pretend world of right and wrong. Yeah, that's right. Jaron, the NFL is the place where douches win. Right. That's probably the statement of the year. Probably the statement of the year. Chad O'Shea, Browns passing coordinator, worked with Tom Brady, worked with Shanahan, worked with Kevin Stefanski. This guy's worked with a ton of people, man. And he's really done a nice job in Cleveland working with Kevin Stefanski when they had to go through all those quarterbacks. He's another guy that would potentially be. Message to the fans, follow the money. Thank you, Q. That was Raider Gruden, not Saints Gruden. Does it matter? Darrell Bevell, Dolphins passing coordinator, has worked with Favre, Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, Trevor Lawrence, Tua, and Mike McDaniel loves the guy. Here's your names. Frank Reich, Cliff Kingsbury, Zach Robinson, passing coordinator for the Rams, Eric Bieniemy. You have to put on that list as well. Would he be too? See, you got to remember something about Eric Bieniemy. Here, I'll ask you. I'll ask you something very simple here. Would the Eagles ever hire Seth Joyner as the coordinator of the Eagles? Would they? Okay. Would they ever hire Seth Joyner as defensive coordinator in Philadelphia? No. Well, then they're not going to hire Eric Bieniemy. Because Eric Bieniemy has that same kind of mentality as well. Okay? Just so you know. He's a no shit kind of guy, and he gets in your ass. So, all right. We're going to take a time out here, and we're going to talk more about, obviously, the direction of what they have to do this week. And I think the process is going to be very important for Nick to have to maneuver through when you're looking at all these assistants. I'm going to talk more about Frank Reich's involvement in your team's selection of finding coordinators for this team. I think that list will grow over the next couple days here. So we'll continue to do that. Don't forget our great friends over at Hooters. Folks, again, you get an opportunity. Log online to northeasthooters.com, and you can get yourself some of the calendars that are out for 2024. There's $100 in gift certificates that are out there. We got coupons inside of them. Don't forget this weekend with football, with the divisional rounds, $2 off of each and every single pitcher that you get, and $1 will go to local charity. So, again, great time for all. Don't forget the lunch specials, Monday through Friday, 11:30 to 3 p.m., boneless wings. Happy hour Monday through Friday, 4 to 6. 6 items, $6. NortheastHooters.com. That's NortheastHooters.com. And do me a favor, when you roll in, tell them Big Sil sent you.
Football and Hooters, the perfect pair.